Okay, welcome back. And, well, I think, okay, don't know, sorry about that. But now we have our friends back in the house. When I say our friends, talking about NOPRIN, they were with us, a couple of weeks ago. NOPRIN, by the way, is Network on Police Reforms in Nigeria, NOPRIN. It's a body that, it's an NGO. Let me introduce we got our guest. Let me introduce Mr. Okechukwu Wanguma, who is the program coordinator of NOPRIN. And then there's Mr. Emeka Nwanevu. Mr. Nwanevu is the national coordinator of NOPRIN, distinguished national coordinator from program coordinator. You know, because the word coordinator in there can just, did I say the same thing twice? No, I didn't. And, Mr. Fola Athawori doesn't need any introduction at all, certainly not to Lagos viewers, but former Solicitor General in Lagos State and also former Commissioner for Lands. And he also is, I have in my notes here, Executive Secretary and CEO of Lagos State Security Trust Fund. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Always a pleasure.
Now, there's so much work for the police to do, and that is your interest, how to make the police even better at what they do. Now, we are focusing here in particular on kidnapping and armed robbery as, you know, a particular one module, if you like, of the whole wide gamut that the police has to do. Kidnapping and armed robbery as a focus in trying to improve police capability. Let me start with you, Mr. Athawori, if I may. We've looked at this problem, especially when the journalists were kidnapped, and there are those who felt at the time, by way of commentary, that the police doesn't appear as equipped as it could be to confront this head-on. You subscribe to that?
Oh, certainly. I mean, there's no doubting the fact that I think what the police are facing in terms of capacity is probably a 20-year underfunding deficit. I see it as that. And that's a critical challenge, which probably can't be met by just the yearly budgetary cycle. So, because the method that the kidnappers use, the broad daylight confrontation, all guns firing, typical robbery.
This impunity again, they're so sure.
Shows it's not that crimes don't happen elsewhere, it's the capacity to respond. And then you have to underpin your police machinery with a call and response system, and that's so critical for me, that we do not, apart from Lagos, there's no dedicated emergency call, distress call, either from the victim or from a witness. So yes, to answer your question, you know, as straightforward as possible, yes, there are capacity deficits. And,
now, your body, this Lagos State Security Trust Fund, I imagine there's a sense in which the work of NOPRIN, you sort of identify with what they're doing, right?
Certainly.
You know, what's the interface?
With us and NOPRIN?
Yes.
Well, basically, it would be, we would consider ourselves perhaps a form of response to the issues that NOPRIN, for instance, has raised, and that the general public knows that something has to be done. So the interface is an exchange of ideas, a commonality of vision, and you know, trying to get the government, the federal government, who is the principal agent of the police, to act with a measure of decisiveness in this issue of capacity. I mean, you've got to bridge it. I always say that the first principle of a viable state is law and order. It's the first principle. And no other part will function effectively if you do not ensure some level of competence and capability in your law and order area, which includes the police and the courts.
Indeed.
If you are looking at all the other issues of social, the people talk about socio-economic issues, they talk about orientation and all of that. For me, these are excuses for non-action. If you want an effective police, you have to, you know, you have to resource them. When you resource them, then other things will fall in. That's essentially, so the fund, as I say, is a kind of, if you like, bridge between the responsibility of the constitutional funders of the police and the reality that you can't close a 20-year deficit gap in a brief period, and the expectation of the people in the street who are not concerned with those details.
Exactly.
Exactly. But those details for a fundamental review and analysis and then solution, those details are important. But perhaps we'll discuss that later on.
Mr. Nwanevu, I imagine that was like music to your ears, you know. There are those who are concerned that the police shouldn't be cast in the, you know, in the light of a bigger kind of a charity-needing organization. Is that a sensitivity that you feel as well? Because it's not as if the police is prostrate, helpless, or is it?
Well, somehow the police is.
Oh dear.
Because of the nature of the political leadership in Nigeria. The political will to support the police is not there. It's been beggarly. Because the budget for police...
But has this been just crass slackness or intentional and premeditated?
In fact, taken from what Mr. Atawore said before, the deficit in terms of capacity for the police is beyond the 20 years he's talking about. It's, in fact, 27 years through the period of military rule to the time of civilian rule and, you know, the lackluster attitude of the politicians to policing. Somehow the politicians also don't want an effective police because of the way they have, you know, done with the political leadership in this country. So it is a mixture of the two, both crass negligence and, of course, the ineptitude of some people in political leadership to know what to do at the proper time.
Now I see that the work of your body, NOPRIN, the Network on Police Reforms in Nigeria, is not going to be, I think you guys are sort of here for the long haul. I don't think you are looking for results in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, but we're already getting results because from some of the issues we've raised, our member organizations have raised, that's how the Lagos State government came with this kind of intervention that Mr. Atawore is leading. And in fact, I want to use this opportunity to congratulate him and the Lagos State government. They have done wonderfully well. In fact, if it is possible...
In Lagos State. So the Lagos State Police Command...
Lagos State government, Lagos State Police Command, and his organization.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a slightly better picture, I use the word slightly relatively, in Lagos State. But there's still, you guys are not concerned solely with Lagos State.
Yeah,
it's
national. That's why we...
Let me take it from there.
Yeah, sure.
What has happened in Lagos State, you know, what the governor has done with this trust fund is a demonstration of the fact that with political will and with accountability, it is possible to make things work. And I want to draw your, mind back to the similar presidential, presidential commission on police equipment trust fund set up by former President Obasanjo. And of course, with the huge sum of money, allocated for improving police operations, suddenly somebody, converted it into an NGO and then diverted the assets and resources meant for equipping the police.
Allegedly, because I don't know, has the matter been sorted out yet?
The issues,
we have to wait on the courts to make a pronouncement. So I think we're probably...
I would say the question is, you don't always have to go to court to come to certain conclusions. The question he raises is that this was a body that was able, from private sector and even local governments, even without their consent and all manner of investments under the urging of the president, that has 70 billion naira. Now, the question is, do we see the impact of 70 billion? That's the question he raises, not whether a court has said or whatever.
Or not whether anybody is culpable.
Or that per se.
But beyond that, you also know about the 3.5 billion for the, I think it's strategic crime prevention. It's a pilot program meant for 7 states.
The 7 states.
In November last year, the House of Representatives Committee on Police Affairs invited the former Minister of Police Affairs. He could not explain what he had done with the money. What the House found out was that from the documents the minister came with, it was discovered that some of the companies that got contracts did not have any fixed address, and part of the fund was used to purchase items that were outside the contemplation. What this money was meant for, and he wasn't able to explain. So the point here is that corruption by senior police officers, politicians, and people entrusted with funds to enhance police
operation.
The corruption by these people is the bane of police efficiency in this country, and unless we deal with
how is your body, how is it going to network on police reforms in Nigeria? How is it going to bring us at least out of where we are now, and at least facing the direction of where we need to be? How is the network on police reforms in Nigeria going to do that?
Part of what we are doing here, is to bring these issues
to the fore,
to generate public debate on these issues, expose this, because people, once these things are mentioned in the media, but unless we keep them consistently in the media,
there are big challenges. There are these big challenges, and then personnel. Personnel is tremendously important. The quality of the officer.
I agree. You see let me I think we need some clarity here.
Sure.
Because you mentioned the Lagos State example. Let me say that principally and primarily under our constitution, the budgeting for the police is a federal function. They are supposed to fund. When the states come in, it is out of expediency. They let us put aside this myth of security vote, and all those things don't exist. They just carry over from there. So many a time the debate is uninformed. And until the debate is informed, we won't have clarity. Which is why, I mean, first of all, he mentioned 7 cities. First of all, 3.5 billion is a joke. It's just not, so not only is the money insufficient, but then it is wrongly applied. And so we compound issues. I think to raise the issue, NOPRIN is basically advocacy. People need to understand the importance of what we're doing. Now you raise the issue of personnel, which is always an issue that people raise. They say police need reorientation. That's what they argue. Then they say that there are socio-economic factors that give rise to crime. And I say that is a work in progress. With the same personnel in Lagos, a better resourced police command has been more effective, at least in relation to today's topic, which is violent crime and kidnapping, which is the focus, which is what I would call the front end, the most visible and frightening aspect of insecurity, which is why it is important. Personnel, you see, we always say Nigerians go for UN assignments and do well because they are resourced. There is no red line or blue line that triggers when your men have been reorientated. You understand? It's very impossible to say. And no manager running a system looks for that. What he first does is he understands the function, he understands the resources, and let us remind ourselves that police is a 24/7 system. There is no off period for the police. Yeah. So it needs the kind of management and resourcing that is decisive, understands the issues. You cannot have a country where the National Assembly procures for itself 407 vehicles, right? 407 vehicles it's not a revenue generating body. And then the federal government gleefully tells us that it has just procured 98 vehicles for the national police. So you can see that even prioritization and decision making is just strange. I find it strange that we don't deploy resources where they are supposed to go. And the sad thing is that the privatization of police resources, the ridiculousness of seeing your police, of armed police officers escorting wives, escorting foreigners. It's just sickening. I find it, it's just appalling, and we need to address these issues.
And then seeing, I talk
Almost domestic, almost domesticated sometimes. It's just disgraceful.
Indeed, I was talking, wasn't I, about this whole matter about the police mustn't be cast in the light of a beggar force. But
They run on charity.
But you find that the police is doing so much on gratefully accepted charity. It doesn't matter from Inspector General to Inspector General. You see this donated by every vehicle repaired by, donated by, rehabilitated by, police force, donated. That surely is a big issue for the police. How we, the society ourselves, view the police.
As a
The problem comes from this same thing we're talking about, political will and budgeting for the police. In fact, the visible police you are seeing now, in fact, even in the last 5 years, is support from the state government.
the state government.
That's why you are seeing all this supported by state government, the vehicle, this, that. Because the federal government has not taken it as a challenge to equip the police, in fact, to resource the police appropriately. In fact, in the last presidential committee where I served, when we tried to get the state governments to statutorily fund the police, it was difficult because of the constitutional provision.
And the
we now have to use
revenue.
the word support,
Yes.
which the state governments are doing. And in fact, they're doing it far better than the federal government, I dare say, because they're intervening directly in terms of equipment, in terms of feedback. If you see that, anyway, let me not, because I'm not in the position, but there's a very strong feedback mechanism between the Lagos State Police Command and his agency and Lagos State government.
And I don't know I don't know how it works, but I don't imagine they write a fact check and hand it to the police.
No. We have a board. We have a board, which is essentially 70% private sector, because they are the contributors. Although it has been in terms of input, I would say the state government 60%. And the private sector 40%. But it's been a very useful arrangement. And that is the difference between the Security Trust Fund and the now defunct Police Equipment Fund is that we are a creation of law. So there is accountability, you need an auditor, and then the board represents the donors, so that decision making is. But I want to say one thing. About the states. You see, it's almost been a damned if I do, damned if I don't kind of thing. And unfortunately, the state governors are now being held responsible by members of the public for security issues, which is totally misconceived. Totally, like it misinformed, misconceived, because and the federal government gleefully keeps quiet and allows that. We need to get the federal government. Happily, we have a new president, relatively new. He needs to understand that we have to make up our minds. If we know first of all, are the budgets properly used? Because it's one thing to budget, it's another thing to allocate the funds. I know that under the Uela Obasanjo paradigm, underfunding of all the budgets was standard IMF Washington consensus. So you found envelope budgeting, which means no matter what the House appropriated, this is all we can give you. Even when Obasanjo was...
One moment, please. I beg your pardon for interrupting you, but Taiwo came on the line, so as not to lose her. Him or her. Good morning, Taiwo. Taiwo?
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Hello?
Hello, sir. I can hear you.
Yeah, good afternoon. I just want to make a little contribution to what is going on there.
Sure.
From local.
Sure.
The issue of the police is from the federal government. The police is actually state. It is not the organization. For the federal government, are not making impact. Honestly, if you want to put it, like I had one of your organizers said now that the issue of using police or escorting women, escorting smart kids and what have you. People look at it that maybe a reason of difficulty. Where does the difficulty come from? The logistics are not in there. The money for the police organization is not even there. The upbringing and everything is down. Even if policemen in Nigeria could be treated well, or the regulation best for them are given to them as a paper. I don't think the job is bad. You take one policeman get out from Nigeria now for this job outside or whatever that means. It's called percentage of 90% and above. Why can't they render the same services here in Nigeria? I ask my brother, We need to talk to the federal government to improve the police for police and what the Lagos government is doing.
Indeed. Thank you very much for calling in.
Hello?
Thank you. I got to let go of you now. Thank you. In case you're just tuning in and wondering what is NOPRIN, it's the Network on Police Reforms in Nigeria. It's an advocacy group, and the focus today is improving police capability, in particular in relation to armed robbery and kidnapping. Now, we had a recent and as we had a recent occurrence of that with Wahab Baba and his colleagues, and we saw somehow it looked like the police were a bit impotent in the whole matter, but I don't know, maybe I was precipitating making that judgment. But you then look at going into 2011. I've seen in the paper somewhere police say we're ready, we're on ground. Mr. Waguma, you go on, take this. The police say that they are ready. We saw, and this is a season where, unfortunately, things like kidnapping and robbery are not unheard of in these parts.
It's a familiar refrain.
Yes.
You know, we've always had this. And if you look at what happened in other states.
Excuse me, you continue. Let me quickly take James. Good morning, James. James?
Good morning.
Good
Hello,
morning.
good morning, Mr.
Good morning, sir. Quickly, please.
Yeah, good morning. This is the issue of police in Nigeria. And I'm sure that most of, every time we call in to address issues in Nigeria, it's like we take them very lightly with our leaders. And it's very, very bad and it's very, very pathetic. You know. Where have you traveled to in the world where you see a cabin crew be escorted with security men? Have you gone to Sheraton of lately? You see cabin crew with convoy be escorted.
It's disgraceful.
And we are talking of security. And you see a policeman wearing slippers walking on the street. I saw one, let me just say, 2 days back, with pass. We all stay out there. We see how police are being drugged, equipped. But here in Nigeria is a different thing, where you see a policeman, either he's escorting an Oba or a chief or a king or whatever, and you leave the primary assignment behind, all in the name of whatever. It's very, very bad. So this thing should be tackled, and let's have more. That's why the issue of kidnapping will never, I don't think it's a thing that will just die off just a second.
Thank you very much for calling in, James. Really appreciate your call. We're looking at the Network on Police Reforms in Nigeria, NOPRIN, and with particular focus on armed robbery and kidnapping. And as we move into 2011, the whole electoral process is going to become even more germane. Police say they're on ground ready, but then it's a familiar refrain.
Yeah, I was just saying that, because if you look at what happened in Abia, it took the intervention of the Israeli Mossad.
Really?
I mean, that's the...
we hear.
It was the news all over the place, that the IG was quoted as having invited the Israeli security...
And that whole matter was, that whole issue was frowned at very, very seriously.
So a police force that could not crack that kind of, that requires an internal intervention cannot be...
If indeed it was Mossad that fixed a lowly kidnapping,
the police did not refute it.
No, lowly, but it was symptomatic of... That's why. But we've already forgotten. They are short that the sense of urgency has gone.
Morning, Demola. A quick one, please, because we're about to go. Good morning, Demola.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir.
My name is Demola. I'm calling from Igbeda. I'm for saying this. There are several instances that people will talking about the problem of the police. We start giving solutions on how to solve the problem. Imagine somebody doing a job and is collecting a peanut as salary. The remunerations are zero. If I had asked of reflecting whether it's coming the issue of the salary, they are all laughing, making jest of them.
Yes.
Because they know if the police are going to take care of all the atrocities they are committing in this country will have come to an end.
Of course.
It's just unfortunate. These are people that will go outside this country to perform excellently, beautifully. But here in Nigeria, they are zero.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because the police is a reflection
Thank you, Demola.
society.
Thank you, Demola. The point has been made. Thank you. And like the caller before, you had made the point of airline cabin crews
Let me,
being
yes,
escorted
let me
by
rest.
police.
Please, I need to say something.
Sure.
The question that we would ask with all this escort is this. This policeman is appointed, is sworn oath, and his functions are as prescribed by the Police Act. Fine. Imagine a scenario where a robbery is going on and this escort goes there. He's not, his own wards are not being robbed, but he sees. Question, will he abandon his escort, I mean his ward, and confront? It's a question of split loyalty. What you have today is that the escorting policeman, it becomes almost a ward of the boss. He feeds him, he houses him. It's almost as if police command has shifted the responsibility for these people. The Inspector General came in early in his tenure and said there were 135,000 policemen on private guard duty, right? And he was going to recall them. But that has not happened. Because the reality of the welfare shock that, and all the housing and all of that. You see, we need, this is very simple for me. It's a simple matter of management. It's a management issue, resourcing. If you can't resource by a budget, then set up a national trust fund, right? Generate the capacity quickly and transfer it quickly to the police. You will see the difference. And again, police.
So it's not rocket science.
It's not rocket science. It's management.
But there doesn't seem to be the will to want to go there.
Because one, the states have taken up the slack over the years and has made the center lazy. Number two, they don't approach this policing as a management challenge. Police are good at procurement, but they never have fuel. They never, look, one of the things we've done in our fund is that we have a 3-month cycle of maintenance. Yes. So we have maintained the capacity. Yeah, they are aging and we will have a plan for, but the RRS and all are out there. If it was a normal system, I assure you, most of the cars would have been grounded. Well, this thing for me is ridiculous for a country, an oil producer to be unable to, within a short time, make a veritable, the 7 Cities project, it talks, is a joke. They did it, they launched one in Ibadan, which was a ridiculous thing, and then snuck in the other bits, and it's dead. Nobody raises the issue anymore.
Kayode, beg your pardon. Kayode, good morning, and thank you for calling in.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, Kayode.
Yeah, you see, the federal government has
We lost him. But in any case,
the federal government has
failed.
failed.
Has failed. So these are the issues, and because it's not there's no shortage of ideas on how to fix the police situation. But the political will is totally is the other matter. Yes. We're fast running out of time. But you said that what NOPRIN, people wondering what NOPRIN is, if you just joined us, is the network on police reforms in Nigeria. And I'm delighted that we have Mr. Fola Arthur-Worry with us, who is he's the CEO, Executive Secretary, and CEO of the Lagos State Security Trust Fund, and he just advocated in there that you need a national
because you need to fast track, this capacity.
So that if people are saying that the police command in Lagos State is
at least has improved.
Yes, as it is. Imagine what you could do.
I think I need to quickly add. In fact, there's a recommendation for a police trust fund at the national level.
Backed by law.
And it has just been supported by the Federal Executive Council about a month ago.
Yes.
So I think the federal government needs to run with it as fast as possible.
And they also need to put responsible people to
help us.
Otherwise we will bleed it
work
again.
with Lagos State government
They
to
need
see
a
how
structure. How is this structured?
Honest, responsible, retired people who have integrity. I'm not saying it because he's here. Even Lagos State people talk about him without knowing him because of his track record. We should be able to find such people in Nigeria to manage the police trust fund nationally. And we can hit the ground.
Give it a legal backing.
Give it a legal backing. Give it accountability because the police equipment fund went. Nobody has been held accountable because there was no law. We do things in an ad hoc manner. We need to get serious in this country. We're not serious.
In addition to the police being ready and on the ground towards 2011, elections, because they've said that much. So in addition to that, we
It's
need
ridiculous. for us to keep taking elections as if war, as if it's a war, it's ridiculous. What you do is you increase police capacity on the ground everywhere
Generally.
as a constant, and then it will deter this. The idea of moving 10,000 men is like it's childish. It's just childish.
I hear you, and I think the views put forthrightly, and that's because the situation demands it.
Yes.
Our police is fast becoming, to exaggerate only very slightly, a domesticated
Yes,
police
and
force.
that for me is offensive.
It's nationally offensive. But I want to thank you very much, Mr. Fola Arthur Worry.
You're welcome.
Former Solicitor General and Commissioner for Lands, and now Executive Secretary and CEO of Lagos State Security Trust Fund.
You're welcome.
And also thank you, Mr. Nwanevu. Mr. Meka Nwanevu is the National Coordinator of NOPRIN, being the Network on Police Reforms in Nigeria. And certainly my thanks to also Okechukwu Nwaguna. Mr. Nwaguma is the Program Coordinator. Now, Program Coordinator is the National Coordinator. Which program?
Well, you know, basically
The media drive.
well, everything. Program projects.
I see.
You know,
I see.
He deals more with administrative issues.
Okay.